you can't have operational excellence without a positive, healthy company culture. And there's a lot of different levels of toxicity. You have toxic owners that are just awful to work with, hostile work environments, and it's just not where you want to work. But then you have the other type of toxic, and that's the people who are, we're family, we all love each other. I love my staff. I truly love my staff. My I'm trying to think. I don't think anyone that's with me right now has been with me under a year. And I have so much gratitude and love for them. I also have 4 children. I would never kill one of my children off. I would absolutely fire an employee for doing something that they shouldn't do. Family means unconditional love. You don't want to give this false sense of security that doesn't exist. And we're not a family. We're battle buddies. We're at war together. I'm not going to leave you behind. You're not going to leave me behind. We're going to work together. We care about each other. It's important to me that we have a we over me mentality, but we are not a family.
How do you see yourself and your leadership? Are you the leader who gets stuff done, you execute, you deliver? Or are you the visionary, the innovator, the ideas person? If you're the latter, then you're in the right place, because today's episode, I'm talking to Emma Rainville, known as the Wizard of Ops. And we'll be hearing all about her book, her podcasts, her business, and her work in helping visionary leaders create the foundational, transformative operational processes to scale their business, to deliver on their idea reliably, consistently, and with excellence, all while staying true to your core values, developing the right positive kind of culture in your organization, and most crucially, retaining some harmony with your personal out-of-work life. All of which are too often overlooked when we get excited about that latest great idea and we've just got to chase it right now. So there's definitely some useful and practical stuff in today's episode. Stick around, don't miss it.
Welcome to the Leading with Integrity podcast. Leadership talk for the modern manager. With your host, David Hatch.
Emma, welcome to Leading with Integrity. Great to have you on the show. Looking forward to our conversation today.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited.
Yeah, and well, in at the deep end, really. Tell us a bit about yourself, what your background is, what you do, why you do it.
Sure. So I am a COO who I own several services businesses, but I think the one we're going to talk most about today is Shockwave Solutions, where we provide fractional COO services and an operations team to execute on that guidance. And so I've been doing that for about 5 years. I help visionary entrepreneurs realize their vision, and then I execute on it.
Simple as that.
Simple as that.
And so what brought you to that? What did you do before?
A whole lot of circumstantial stuff that just happened that got me here. I started out going to school, trying to figure out what I wanted to do and paying for it with operations jobs. And then after 2 master's degrees and a PhD, I was like, oh, well, yeah, probably I should have been going to school for operations this whole time. But instead, I got the experience. And so I was the director of operations. I found myself the director of operations of the largest HVAC company in the state of Texas. And I got promoted to COO. And then life happened and I moved and I got a remote position as not really an operations role. I was contracted to come in and create processes, create a few divisions that they didn't have established. And then over time, the owner hired me as his COO. And then I found myself in direct response and absolutely fell in love with visionary entrepreneurs and new products and new things. And online is not easy, but interesting and different, but easier in my opinion than brick and mortar. And I fell in love with the whole thing. And couple of years later, decided to start my own business and work with a whole lot of people instead of just one.
Fair enough. It's often the way, isn't it? Like the career we plan for ourselves at the beginning bears little resemblance to what actually happens.
Resemblance, yeah. It's really fun. Every one of my degrees are in the medical field, and I have no interest in that whatsoever. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. I think it makes life more interesting, though, doesn't it? You end up sometimes things you don't expect turn into the thing you love doing the most.
Right.
Like for me, that's podcasting. Like I never in a million years would have expected myself to end up doing this, but I love it.
and yet here we are.
Exactly. Yeah. Life's funny sometimes, isn't it? So a couple of things that you didn't mention in there, I think, is the fact that you've written a book, a best-selling book as well, I believe.
Yeah.
And you're hosting 2 podcasts of your own as well. So tell us more about those.
Sure. I'll start with the book. So it actually just came out. It is a bestseller, but it's called Scope. And so I think that when you look at the front cover of it, you think that it's how to shoot well or something, because it literally has a scope, but it's setting your vision, create processes, operational excellence, people development, and execution. It's all about running a business. It's the operational framework by which you should run a business. And it's very specific to businesses with remote teams. There are a lot of books out there, a lot of philosophies around operational frameworks. There are very few that include a foundational framework and none that allegate 2 things. And one is your personal life. You build a business, but nobody ever on their deathbed said, gee, I wish I would have made $1 million more or launched that product. They say, I wish I would have spent more time with my children, or I wish I would have taken that vacation. So we build the business strategy with the things that you want for your life in mind on the foundational side. And then on the operational framework on how we run the business and how we do everything, it's just you're set up to respond rather than react. And it's set up to work with remote teams, which is not difficult, but it's a different animal. When you try and create an operational framework that's meant for a warehouse or a brick or mortar store, it makes it very, very difficult to follow that strategy. So that's why I wrote Scope, and I'm pretty proud of it. There's not a lot of fluff in it. There's not a lot of sales in it. Most books have a ton of reasons why you should listen to the author and all about them. And I just didn't want to do that. It's very factual and here's how you do it and here's why. And then I do have 2 podcasts. I have Special Ops podcast, where we just give actionable insights to visionary entrepreneurs, specifically in direct response and e-commerce. I think we have a lot of stuff in there for a lot of people, but it's very specific we mean to be specific to that. And then I have another podcast with Perry Belcher that I co-host. Perry Belcher is the godfather of marketing. Most people know who he is. I don't know why he picked me, but he did. And so we call that Trainwreck now. We recently rebranded it because I'm operations, he's marketing, and we just fight through the whole podcast about everything. And it's just a train wreck, but it's so entertaining. And there's just so many nuggets of brilliance on how to grow a business. So I really enjoy doing that one as well.
I love the name. Yeah, it's a classic point of tension, isn't it, in any business, I think, between marketing / sales and operations. Have been through that myself. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can confirm. I think if you handle it right, though, it's a healthy conflict.
Oh, like I wouldn't do it if it was unhealthy or toxic. There's a beautiful thing about 2 people that can come together with no ego, debate and argue for what the better idea is. And then you never end up with one side or the other. You end up with a mesh of each. And so you're able to create true magic when you can have those types of conversations. And that's, I think, probably a lot of the power that Perry and I have in building businesses together is because we're able to walk in and neither of us need to be right. We need to leave with the right idea.
Yeah, I feel like that's maybe a dying art in the world, isn't it?
It's a superpower. It's a superpower. It took me years to be able to figure out how to do that. It's not easy. It's not easy.
No, definitely not. Yeah, it's setting the ego aside. I mean, in any walk of life, any conversation almost these days, things are so divisive in the world. It's very challenging to be able to put aside that fixed position and just
Right.
focus on finding the answer, whatever it is.
Right.
So yeah, really applaud that. Yeah, I'll be listening very soon. Can
Oh,
count
good.
on that. So going back to the book again, I mean, a bestseller and it's only just launched, so well done for a
Thanks.
start.
Thank you.
Second one, then, if you had to, and I know you're going to struggle to do this, I'm sure, if you had to pick the single most important lesson out of the book that every business leader should take away, what would it be?
Create a foundational framework for your business. It would actually isn't hard at all for me. I think that at year 3, a lot of companies struggle, and sadly, a lot of great companies fail, and it's because they didn't create that, and they end up in running in circles chasing their tail when they could have just had a plan. So it takes about 3 days. Take the 3 days and create your foundational framework for your business. So in the book, I actually created a whole nother acronym called WAVE. It's called Written Vision, Absolute Focus, Values Driven Future, and Execute. You'll notice execute is in both. You have one that's like the preliminary and then one that's the ongoing. Because everybody's that it's ever started a business is likely a quick start, right? So, but not so much a finisher. So we get the second execute to keep them going. So written vision is, where are you going to be in 10 years? What's your picture of that? Ghost of Christmas future comes and grabs you and brings you to the window of your work office. What does everything look like? What are you selling? Who's working there? How big is your business? What have you become? And then we also look at your personal life. Did you get married? Did you have a few kids? If you already have kids, how old are they? How involved are you in their lives? And we plan that way. And then we go back and say, what are the 5 and 3 year, I call them flash forwards, but they're essentially milestones. What are the milestones that you need to get at year 3 and year 5 in order to get to that year 10? And then what are our 1 year commitments? Goals are something we're striving for. Commitments are something we don't go to bed until we complete. So what are we committed to getting done this year and being focused on? And so now I've got my plan on what I want to accomplish. Then I need to decide, what am I focused on? What's my absolute focus? What is the business's purpose or cause? What do we do? And then everything that comes up, all we have to do is say, does that align with our absolute focus? And if it does, it'll likely help the business. If it doesn't, it'll throw wrenches or shiny objects at the business and keep it from doing what it was meant to do. So we create an absolute focus. And then we have values driven future. Essentially what that is we're going to create an avatar for who works for you. We spend so much time creating avatars on our customer base and no time understanding who's going to be the face and mouth of our company, who's going to be deciding what products we have, who's going to be deciding what to say to the customer when they call when they're angry. And so how do you want those people to behave? What values and morals do you have that you want them to have as well? And so we're going to build an avatar for your vendors and employees. And the final one is simply execute. And that's going to be, you're going to take and you're going to, for execution, you're going to take those 1 year commitments and you're going to determine who's going to do them, how they're going to get done, what resources are needed, what are the milestones that you're going to know that you're on track for the end of the year. And that's WAVE. That's it. It's not rocket science. It's not some brilliant thing. It's about taking the time. And in the book, we just created a whole bunch of prompts so that people don't have to go, well, in 10 years, I'm going to have a beautiful office in downtown Los Angeles with 150 people and we're selling 30 products. That doesn't really give you guidance. So we give prompts so that way you have the solid guidance that you need and that you can share with the people that work for you so that they can make decisions on your behalf for what you wanted. And then you don't have to micromanage as much either.
Yeah, I mean, I love that approach. I also, going back to what you were saying earlier on about the book itself, building in that the personal life, the things outside of work, I think that's so important, especially in that entrepreneurial, visionary leader type of person, because we've all done it, haven't we? Like work becomes the biggest, most important, the only thing in our life.
I did it.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I'm watching all my clients they were getting mad at me because I was doing what they asked me to do, but I didn't take enough time to slow them down enough to make sure they weren't creating a plan. And I did the same thing. I created a plan that I was on the brink of divorce. I had no idea even what my children were up to. Like, I knew that they were living close by and seeing my husband regularly, but I didn't really understand the details of their lives. So I was working 90 hours a week trying to build something, and I wanted to. That's what I wanted to do, but I just didn't think through, when my son has his first son, am I going to be traveling or I'm going to be present? I was traveling. I was in Prague when my first grandchild was born. So this isn't what I want for myself. So I need to very intently build my life by design.
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult one, isn't it? I think this is why so many people struggle with it, because it's possible to want multiple things.
It absolutely is. But when you sit down and you can see it all and you write it down, you can choose. There are things that I choose to sacrifice from my family side and from my business side, because I know what the ultimate goal is. But I get to choose. I get to consciously choose. It's not like I've invested a ton of money and now I have to make the choice based off of bad decisions that I've made, which forces my hand. I can make the choice before anything's happened. And if I choose to miss out on something, for the business, or I choose to miss out on something for the business, for the family, it's something I can feel good about, because it was my choice. I wasn't forced. I didn't force my own damn hand. That's the thing too, is you force your own hand to make bad decisions. And then it gives a whole different kind of anger than when someone else forces you to.
Yeah. And it's, especially when you love what you're doing as well, it's so easy to just it's that bury the head in the sand, put the blinkers on, and like you blink and you miss it. And suddenly, like, you've been doing it for 10 years and you haven't noticed all these other things.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, it's got to be better to at least know what those choices are before you start, and pick them, or find the balance, find a way that it works for you and you can live with it.
Right.
So yeah, I'm a huge supporter of that. That is, I'm not sure about the phrase work-life balance, but it's in that
There's
region.
no such thing. There's no such thing.
But it's in that area, isn't it?
That drives me really crazy when people say that. I think that there's work-life balance for people who have jobs, people who have careers, and people who have businesses. It's about making choices on when to choose one or the other, and making sure that is balanced. There's no work-life balance. My opinion, there just is not. But never taking time off and never taking time for yourself has become a badge of honor for entrepreneurs and people who have, executive level directorships. And it just shouldn't be. It just shouldn't be. My biggest badge of honor is I took 30 days off work last year. Me and my husband sailed on a boat to the UK over 2 weeks, and then spent 2 weeks hopping around the UK, just being absolutely in love with each other and having a great time. And I think I worked 6 hours that whole month. And it was that is when I knew that I did it. Not because I wasn't able to take any vacations for the past 3 years and I've, made tons of money. Great. That's not where it's at. That's not success, and that's not happiness. Not for me anyway.
The personal angle, I think, matters, doesn't it? Like, for you, what works. Yeah, no, I really love all of that. I think the other thing about the work you're doing, about your book as well, giving people that framework to make that work, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Because it's all well and good, like, knowing what would work for you and what you'd like to achieve, but actually the key is in the E, isn't it? Execution, as you've said a couple of times.
It really is. A well thought out plan written down is worth nothing more than toilet paper without execution.
Mm-hmm.
And executing is hard for some. Not executing is hard for some people. So that's why for people who it can create the dreams and the plans, they need to just find the people who have anxiety about seeing the dreams and the plans and not doing anything about it, and just partner with them, whether they become staff or they become partners. But there are two archetypes, right? And you just got to mesh them together, and then it's just fire once you do that.
Yeah. I think I agree with you about work-life balance as well. It's one of those phrases, isn't it? Like, it's become part of the language. So when you're talking about that, you have to say that so everyone knows what you mean. But
it's silly. Whenever somebody says it to me in an interview, I just know that I'm not going to hire them. Because it's not realistic. At least not in our world. I want you to have a life, and I want you to be prioritizing your mental health and your if you're constantly like going, your work quality isn't great. So I want you to prioritize rest. I want you to prioritize those things. But you have to prioritize when you're going to be working and when you're going to be resting, because day to day, it just doesn't exist. I mean,
No, no.
not in my opinion.
I think usually I'm an advocate of finding balance in things, but I think when it comes to this specific one, balance implies that each of the different parts are equal, doesn't it? And
Because
I mean, best will in the world.
at all times.
Well, exactly, yeah.
Part work-life balance at all times. You have to have work balance, life balance. You have to. But work-life balance, on the implication that it's at all times, it doesn't make sense. Sometimes you have to prioritize your family. Period. Sometimes you have to prioritize your work. That just is.
Yeah, definitely. It's like I say, I mean, best will in the world. At least half of your waking hours probably are going to be work during work days.
People who have a career, it's 1/3 of your life is spent working, 1/3 of your life is spent sleeping. And so if the other 1/3 is spent on family, learning, spirituality, exercise, mind body alignment, it doesn't leave much time, does it?
It really doesn't. There's not enough hours in the day, are there? We need more.
There really is not. So you need to know when to place those things. I not to get off tangent a little bit, but
No, it's okay.
I hate the fact that it's a Monday, Friday, take the weekend off. I can't stand that. And I obviously, all of my staff do that, and I want that for them because that's what they want. But for me personally, I will just work days and days. And then I will take off work when I need to. When I'm in a flow, why would I take off Friday? I'm here. I'm in it. Like, I'm excited about what I'm doing. And when I'm tired, I take time off. I might take, 7 days off, 10 days, sometimes 30 days off. Not often, but sometimes as much as 30 days off to just rest and reset. And other times I'll work 60 straight days because I feel called to. Because my body and my mind is trying to create and plug things in, and I feel good about it. Why would I stop for 2 days? Because everyone else does. And this is how I get one up on most people, because I work in like full consciousness and flow. And when I'm not hitting what I need to hit for my brain and my body, I take time off for it.
I think knowing yourself is one thing, isn't it? And then also having the ability to do something about it once you do. And I think that's where we're fortunate as being our own bosses. We can decide, like, I'm going to work through a few weekends because I'm feeling it right now and I want to get this done while I'm there, while I'm in that right headspace. But equally, it's recognizing when you're not and being able to, like, almost forgive yourself, really. Just say, I need time off, so I'm going to do it, and I'm not going to feel guilty about that.
Right.
That for me has been one of the biggest benefits of working for myself now and not someone else. It's having the ability to do that.
I'm unemployable. I've been unemployable for probably a decade, really. I was employed, but it was because I was also employed by someone who's unemployable. But I don't think I could get a job at this point if I needed or wanted to. I couldn't work.
Yeah, I mean, I think if I absolutely had to, I could grin and bear it and get through it. But I will never do it by choice.
I don't think anybody would have me. I'm used to beating my own drum. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a different question. I'd rather not think about that personally, but I'd rather just have my little illusion and not shatter it yet.
Just go freelance, buddy. Don't do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Scaling companies is something I would hazard a guess, a fair bit about.
A little bit.
So what would you say is like the biggest mistake when it comes to operations and scaling up a business that most companies make, and how can they avoid it?
So I'm going to sound like a broken record, but not having a plan, right? So they see shiny objects, they try to implement it. They see shiny objects, they try to implement it. When you have a plan, when you have a foundational framework and then an operational framework in your business, you because you review it every quarter and every year, you have the opportunity to add things in when it's appropriate and when it fits the company's mission, right? And so when you are just flying by the seat of your pants, and I hear it all the time, particularly people who are business owners, there's a couple of things. Number one, we're all grandiose. You can't be a business owner without being grand. You have to have an unbelievable belief in yourself to take the risk that you took when you decided to do it, right? So the majority of us are, pretty grandiose. The second part of that is we have a spirit of finding opportunity where no one finds opportunity. And so we're constantly looking for it. And there's lots of opportunity out there. I'm stealing this from someone else, but if you think about your driving to work today and how many red cars you saw, you couldn't possibly give me an answer. But if I told you before you left for work, I'm going to give you $50 every time you count a red car, you'd be able to tell me the exact number of red cars you saw, right? Visionary entrepreneurs, most business owners are constantly looking for the red cars, so they see so many of them. The problem with seeing so many of them is like, oh, I could make $1 million doing that. I could make $250,000 doing that. I could make $300,000 doing that. And then we don't focus and spend enough time on the stuff that we've already started to implement to actually make that work. So we think that we're stepping over we're stepping over dollars to get to dimes. But the reality is, if you don't home down on one thing and work on that and make that profitable before you go try and do the next thing, unless you have a massive amount of resources and can implement a whole new team, you generally find yourself spinning in circles with uncertainty and doubt on what priorities are. And that is where I think I've seen $15 million companies tanking because of that thing.
I'm not sure if this is a quote or a cliche, but I feel like the biggest strategic mistake is not having a strategy. And maybe that's dumbing it down a bit. But I mean, if that were the case, what do you think would be the second biggest mistake?
Sure. Not understanding your numbers. The amount of business owners that can't tell me revenue, they can't tell me profits, they can't tell me what their balance sheets look like. They just know they have money in the bank. And so I like to go so far as to understanding each one of my products, how much each product or service is bringing in revenue, is bringing in profit. What does that profit amount expend on the resources of my business? What is it costing me to get there? And then I like to look at it holistically to make sure I'm in alignment for what's best for the business, for the staff in the business, and for the longevity of the business. I just don't think enough people have any idea what their numbers are. And when you are like that, you're going 1,000,000 miles an hour into a brick wall.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't measure it, you can't improve it, right? So.
Well, the number one reason companies go out of business is because they scaled themselves out of business. It's not actually because they failed in selling products. It's because they failed at managing their money. And so as you grow, it costs you money to grow. And if you're not paying attention to those costs, a lot of us don't make money on day one. The money comes a little bit later. And so inventory, labor, traffic, media, all that costs money. And that money's due today, but sometimes the money we make, it doesn't come until later. And if you don't understand your numbers, you can easily scale yourself right out of the ability to run your business. And I've seen it, sadly, way too many times.
And in the businesses you work with that have succeeded, what do you think is the common thread, aside from doing the opposite of what we've just talked about as mistakes?
Sure. Well, the reason I get called in usually is because that's happening and they catch it in time to call me. Actually, I'm very fortunate because only one time in my career have they called me too late, and there was really nothing I could do. Number one, if they never have a strategic plan, but they go and they create one. And then they become obsessed with making sure everybody understands it. And then the owner generally gets out of the way. And unfortunately, it's usually us that create 80% of the problems. And then we blame the staff because they can't keep up with us. But it's really because we haven't set a proper foundation and led them well. And so that's the number one thing. The number two thing is they get really hyper-focused on, you create a checklist and they're hyper-focused on each checklist. They don't worry about the big picture. It's like, this is what I need to solve today. We get that solved, and then we moved on to what we need to solve tomorrow. And then we get that solved. When you try and, first of all, when you create a complete, utter mess and chaos, there's so many things, it becomes overwhelming and you're all over the place. But when you can dummy down and say, this is what I'm going to take care of today, and all your effort and energy and resources goes into that, and then the next thing, and then the next thing, you can usually dig yourself out pretty quickly.
Yeah, I mean, one thing at a time, and the spinning plates analogy is my favourite in this one. It's just deal with one plate at a time.
You're never going to be able to get them all.
Exactly, yeah. Unless there's like enough of you for one per plate. But even then, that's not always practical. So the other thing you said there that I want to pick up on that I think is I mean, certainly where I've seen companies go wrong is that bit about communicating the strategy. I don't know how often you've seen this. I mean, I've seen it a few times. I've worked in organisations where this has been done really poorly, but it's all well and good having the strategy and having the plan. But if you won't tell anyone what it is, or you won't communicate it consistently and in a way that is understood by everyone, I mean, what was your analogy earlier? Like, it's as good as toilet paper.
Right. A strategic plan well written down with no execution is as good as toilet paper.
Yeah.
We create posters. You can actually, not everybody's going to be on video, but you can see one behind me right there. We create posters, and what we have for our businesses is like a little snapshot of where we're at in 10 years, the milestone for 3 and 5, and the commitments well written out on it. We have our values on it. We have our absolute focus on it. And then I disperse those to the people who work for me. Obviously, I got a guy in Mauritius, Africa. He has it as like a postcard. But everybody stateside has a poster, and I have them up in my office, and we talk about them often. It's never, ever once happened that I came into a company and asked everybody what the vision was and had every single person tell me what the vision was and alignment, and not even close. And so by the time I leave, that's something that I make sure, and I do different things at different times for different businesses, obviously, depending, like you can't do everything for, you can't do the same strategy for everyone, because sometimes you're dealing with lower level employees, and sometimes you're dealing with executives. But when I'm dealing with lower level management, I'll do things like every time I get on a meeting, I'll have Amazon gift cards, and I'll say, who can tell me our absolute focus? Like in the middle of the meeting, and the first person that can give it to me gets a $25 Amazon gift card. Obviously, that's not going to work with executives. Executives have to be held accountable in a different way. But you just have to make it gamified and fun, and make sure that people know it and live it and remember it. And then the other thing that you do is when you do your reviews, you review it with them. Every time you do a quarterly review your business strategy. These are the people, whether they're answering the phone to your customer service person or planning out your sales funnels, these are the people that are responsible for your business. They need to know your vision for your business. So.
Yeah, and I would add a layer of detail to that as well. I think from a leadership perspective, especially when you're dealing with those middle managers, let's say, who are leading the people at, I don't know, the coalface, whatever the business happens to be, whatever that looks like. It's not just about like, this is what the grand plan is, this is what the objectives are, this is what we need to hit this year, etc. And this is where you fit into that. This is what your contribution it looks like and why you matter in this.
Right.
I found if you don't do that as well, it can be quite difficult to get people excited about it if you can't do that.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. One of the things that we do when we create, so after we create our 1-year commitments, we need to now create quarterly goals. This is what we're going to strive to do this quarter. And each goal has someone assigned to it. I actually have, I don't want to call it a contract, but it kind of looks like a contract that says, you understand it. I've given you enough resources. You feel good about it. You feel good about the path forward to get it done, and you accept the responsibility of getting it done, and then you sign on it. And that level of ownership, I think, not only makes people feel important, but it also ensures that they understand what you're asking them to do. And you'd be surprised how many people go, yep, got it. You give them that piece of paper, and then they have 50 questions about the project. So,
yeah, I think that's human nature, isn't it? Because there's not many people, especially when dealing with an authority figure or leader or their manager, they're not going to necessarily want to admit they didn't understand what you told them until they have to, when, as you say, confronted with, okay, this is what I've got to deliver now. I'd better make sure I understand it.
Quick interview tip, by the way. If you're in an interview, talk to people about terminology in the industry. And then when you say, do you know what that is? And they say, yes, don't move on. Ask them to define it for you. And if they can't, don't hire them, because that means that they don't have the ability to speak up when they don't know something.
Yeah. I'm not a fan of interviews, but anyway.
You just hire them straight off. They apply, they get the job, and just test it out.
Yeah, I mean, I've spoken about this before on the podcast. We've had a couple of HR experts who've given some ideas on it, but I just, maybe it's biased by my own personal experience, I'm sure, but I just, from either side of the table, I don't find you get the best out of that situation, because people are going to be nervous. They might not have.
What do you do when you need to hire someone? I'm so curious.
Well, I don't hire people. I'm a business of one. So when I work with freelancers, it'll be people I've known for a long time. So there'll be an existing relationship. So it's not quite the same. But some of the ideas that I like, that I've heard from people I spoke to. So one I like is where it's effectively like a week-long interview. So you just get them to do the job for a week.
Yeah.
And you pay them, and
we do it for 2 days. We do a working interview for 2 days.
Well, there you go.
Solve problems. But we definitely do interviews before we get to that point. But yeah, so you just go straight to that.
I think that's what I would do if I were to do it over again. Yeah.
Interesting.
I just think maybe it's the time aspect of it. I feel like you get more of an insight into things like work ethic and personality and fit with the team and all those kind of things than you can get from like an hour or two in an interview. Even if you do like 3 or 4 rounds of interviews, it's much more pressured.
I don't like the 3 to 4 rounds of interviews. I think it's
no, neither do I.
I personally think it's silly. I generally like to do 90-ish minutes and get a good feel for the personality and the way they learn. I also do a test. So it's a test first, and it's actually a personality test and an ability to learn test. I don't care what you know coming into my business. Actually, the least, the better. I'd rather you do things my way, and you're not going to do things my way if you already know how to do them. So that's number one. And then once they take the test and I understand their personality, I meet with them. 90 minutes is my sweet spot, but depending on how busy I am, it might be 30, it might be 2 hours. It just depends. And then they go into a 2-day working interview with my team. And then we look at the outcomes. So yeah, it would be interesting to test that. But if you have 60 people who apply and 12 that you think work, that's going to be a lot of throwing away money, because you can't give them real work to do. You have to give them stuff that you understood outcomes for, if that makes sense. Anyway, in operations. Anyway, I derailed us enough.
No, it's an interesting point worth discussing. But so you do pay them for the 2 days then? Of
course. Yeah, you can't have somebody work that long and not pay. Yeah. It just feels right to do a paid situation. Depending on the job too, if it's something bigger like marketing or analytics, generally we give them like 30 hours worth of work and they have a week to get it done. So we just pay them for the deliverable. Most of the time it's like, because we're operations, it's like 2 days, and it's thinking through problems and what you would do to solve them and outlining how you would solve them. So yeah, but your way's interesting. I think it could just become very costly.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say it's my way. It's just an idea I've heard.
A lot of times I'll talk to someone in 5 minutes, know that they're not going to be a fit for my team.
Yeah, but then they wouldn't have made it through anyway. So I guess
you would have paid them for a week of work.
Well, so this is the bit where I'm not so sure about the idea or how to actually execute it. Is you're obviously not going to give everyone that 1 week opportunity. That's got to be your shortlist, doesn't it? Because otherwise, like you say, it's going to get so expensive. Exactly. That's the question.
Right. I get 60 interviews and I send 60 resumes and I send out 60 tests. Or that wouldn't happen. I would send out probably 20 tests. And out of the 20 tests, generally 10 people come back worth interviewing. That could be quite costly. Get a lot of work. Maybe.
I guess it depends how many people you're hiring for the job as well, doesn't it? Like if it's a big team and you're scaling it up, that's one thing.
Right.
But if it's just one vacancy at a time, then maybe it's a bit more
the
manageable.
norm, right? Which is probably the norm, unless it's like customer service or it's an interesting concept.
Yeah, I think for me, the reason it appeals is that it's the bit about paying them for their time. It's valuing their time. Because I think that's the bit that gets lost in a lot of recruiting processes these days. And it's not a small amount of time that you're asking candidates to.
5, 6, 7 interviews, panel interviews. It's a lot.
Yeah,
It's a
it
lot
is.
of time. It's a lot.
And if they're serious about it as well, it's not just the time they spent interviewing. They're prepping. They're doing their research. They're putting a lot of effort into this.
Yeah.
So, yeah, for me, it's about respecting that time, I think. But anyway, yeah. I mean, the caveat to all of that is if you have a system that's working for you and you're getting candidates that are a good fit for your organization, then ignore me.
The nice thing about remote teams, and that's what mostly I work with, is you get to explore the whole world for the best person. I run a few service companies in Texas. I'm the CEO of a couple of service companies in Texas, and I don't have that luxury. Those are so much harder to hire for. People in person are so much harder to hire for because the pool of the globe is one of the I'll tell you, the 2 best hires of my entire career I have on my team right now. And one is from Leeds, UK, and the other one is from Mauritius, Africa. And that guy in Mauritius is an absolute beast. He's an assassin. I love working with him. He's incredible. And never, ever, ever would I have found him had I had to hire. And he's great. He doesn't work with 4 people. So anyway, it's much easier hiring remote teams for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it can go both ways, can't it? Because the talent pool is the whole world, which can be great, but
it could
also be.
Everything's over Zoom. You have no idea who you're really hiring.
Yeah, but also you might get thousands of applicants.
So we have a lot of, yes, that's absolutely true. But we have a lot of, number one, you create KPIs for the role. Then you create a job description based off the KPIs. And then you set parameters around the cover letters and the resumes that you get. And the algorithm will wipe out 90% of what you get. Because 90% of the people will just send you the same cover letter that they sent everybody else. And in the description, it's tell me what you know about my company and why you want to work for me. And 90% won't do that. So you just take all those out and then you only go, who's serious?
Yeah, I mean, the other thing I was going to say is like this is why I don't quite understand the people who say things like remote working is not the way forward and it doesn't work for my business and all of these kind of things. I mean, all of that potential talent that you're just ignoring.
That's like saying AI is a trend.
Well, yeah, this is it, isn't it? I don't understand it. Like there's so much. I mean, even me as a business of one, there's so much that I've managed to do that I never would have been able to do if remote work hadn't become more of a thing in recent years. I mean, this podcast is one of them, for example.
Well, COVID taught us a lot about a lot.
Yeah.
A lot about a lot. And we had 3 clients that had all of their business in a building. And so one absolutely needed to be in a building. They absolutely needed to be in a building. When they sent everybody home to work, production went down. It was a media buying agency. Their profits plummeted. They needed to be in the same space. It was too serious and people needed to be too close. But the other 2, they flourished. I mean, the productivity of people, they weren't yapping at each other all day. There was no drama one of the businesses was 23 women. In between the ages of 22 and 30 and 1 man. And it was an absolute sorority house of a shit show. And so, yeah, they did a phenomenal turnaround when they went remote and we never went back.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to imagine office politics being worse when you're working remotely.
Yeah. I believe that a lot of not all, but a lot of business owners that believe that it's because they have a fear of their own abilities to hire and lead. and they have a fear that their employees will, buck off and watch TV and not work. And that's just not the reality of the average remote worker. The average remote worker actually works, are you ready for this? More active hours, working 18% longer because they don't know how to shut off at the end of the day. Because dinner is ready, but they just need to finish this one thing, so they end up eating in front of their computer. This is not necessarily healthy, don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to create toxic work environments, but the fear is it's just not reasonable or justified. Remote workers work more and produce more because they have less distraction as well.
Yeah. I mean, there's an irony there, isn't there, that those employers, those bosses, they're worried about people slacking off when they can't see them. And actually, the complete reverse is true. And actually, those employees are probably harming their mental health and their stress level and their, yeah.
Yep.
I'm not using the phrase we talked about earlier deliberately. But yeah, it is a difficult, I think as a society, I think we've got better at that since COVID because we've had to. But I think there was definitely an adjustment period where we had to learn how to work within that when the lines between work and home were literally blurring.
Right.
And, not everyone was as fortunate as we were. And I mean, there were people who were working out of their bedrooms and things like that. I mean, That must have been really difficult. You're literally working where you sleep.
Right. Right.
I think we've got better at it generally. And now it's why it confuses me, and it also worries me when we see these things about return to office and it all being mandatory and all this kind of thing. And it's not great for anyone, least of all the business owners. I just don't get it.
Yep, I agree.
Anyway, so slight tangent from that then. You mentioned about values earlier and it's on your posters. So, I mean, what role do you see the culture of a company playing in that operational excellence that we're all looking for?
You can't have operational excellence without a positive, healthy company culture. And there's a lot of different levels of toxicity. You have toxic owners that are just awful to work with, hostile work environments, and it's just not where you want to work. But then you have the other type of toxic, and that's the people who are, we're family, we all love each other. I love my staff. I truly love my staff. I'm trying to think. I don't think anyone that's with me right now has been with me under a year. And I have so much gratitude and love for them. I also have 4 children. I would never kill one of my children off. I would absolutely fire an employee for doing something that they shouldn't do. Family means unconditional love. You don't want to give this false sense of security that doesn't exist. And we're not a family. We're battle buddies. We're at war together. I'm not going to leave you behind. You're not going to leave me behind. We're going to work together. We care about each other. It's important to me that we have a we over me mentality, but we are not a family. We are a battalion, and we are at war, and we are going to work together and always work together for the greater good of the team. But that type of toxicity, I see it all the time. And then you have one person that does something wrong and they get in trouble, and you kind of watch it all fall like a house of cards because we're friends. Why would you yell at me? We're family. You tell me you love me. And in a sense of we're family, like I belong to you, you belong to me. And so that's a whole nother level of toxicity that also needs to be very, very, because I think it's worse.
I would agree with that. It's a pet hate of mine is people using that particular F word when talking about their colleagues.
You would look around and it's usually everybody's been there for 2 years or less, and it always circumvents. That's not how families work. Families are the same 35 people year after year at the Christmas party, right? So it just, that's always a big, big, big red flag for me when I ask a business owner, what's the culture like at your business? And they say, we're a family. I consider them my family.
I think as well, like most cases, the person who says that is the only one who thinks it in that whole organization. Nobody else sees it.
I think other people go along with the philosophy because,
yeah, maybe.
I've seen it. I've seen it a few times where, particularly that company I told you about with 23 women, they all very much felt like they were a family and no one was getting anything done. And it was just cat fights all the time and drama and nonsense. It was absolute insanity. You could go into the restroom at any point and there'd be a girl in there crying. It was just absolute insanity. And it was acceptable because we're family.
Mm.
And so my employees' problems are my problems. And I believe that wholeheartedly. If Richard is going through something that's really affecting his life, it's going to affect his work, and that becomes my problem. That doesn't mean that everything that his business is his business. If he needs my help, I'm his employer. He's helping me build my business. It's my job to help him in any way that I can that's appropriate. Because you can't leave your problems at the door. That's not real. But at the same time, it's not like, oh, you seem to be having a bad day. Are you having a fight with your wife? What's going on? How can I, it's just that's a whole nother level of inappropriate toxicity in culture.
Not to drop the B word again, but I think there is a balance to be had between the two that is the right way, that is appropriate, but can still show that you care.
Yep.
And I think, so my biggest problem with the word family, you hit the nail on the head with one word, and that was that word unconditional. And I think that is the cause of toxicity in both directions there, because it's not long before it's just the expectation that you'll work super hard. You'll do like 15 times the hours you should because we're family and that's what family does.
No.
And ultimately it just becomes this, like, I don't want to bring gender into it, but quite often when I've seen that, there's that person at the top of the organization who wants to see themselves as the father figure. And they may be doing it.
Or the queen or king. I think that's...
Well, quite. Yeah.
It's more the grandiose thing.
Yeah. It's that sort of, you're not with it enough to look after yourself. You need me here to look after you. That's my role. That whole mindset.
Right.
It's just, it's so toxic, isn't it? And it's so, I mean, taken to extreme, it's pretty demeaning, frankly, for the people who are working for them as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, yeah. Anyway, and then my favorite comparison was somebody on the podcast last year compared it to being in the mafia. Like, you're part of the family, which made me laugh.
Right, but if you screw up, you get shot in the back of the head. Yeah, that actually,
quite.
I mean, if you think about it, that actually, yeah.
I don't know a lot about the mafia apart from the movies, but
I don't either.
It made me laugh.
I know Goodfellas.
Yes. Exactly. Yeah. Right. So I'm slightly conscious of time. We've gone off on some lovely tangents.
Yeah, this has been so fun. It's very ADD. We're all over the place, but yeah.
Yeah, but that just means it was a fun conversation. Right. I do, however, have one last question for you that everyone has to answer, so you've got to do it, I'm afraid. It's called Leadership Heroes.
Leadership Heroes.
So if you had to pick one person, it could be anyone you like, they could be alive, dead, past, present, real or fictitious, who in your opinion would perfectly embody leadership, who would that person be and why?
You're going to hate my answer. I knew that this was coming because I've listened to your podcast. I've designed my answer in a way that's going to piss you off, but I don't care because that's who I am.
Thanks.
So I feel like there are two leaders that if I could have them have a baby, we would have the perfect leader, because Steve Jobs and Brene Brown, they have every yin and yang to them. Steve Jobs is a phenomenal leader, but probably didn't make people feel so good. Brene Brown is a phenomenal leader, but is missing some of the elements that Steve Jobs had that really incites innovation. And both of them excite me, and I've studied both of them, and I think they're both phenomenal. If I could just mesh them together as one, that would be so. Sorry.
I mean, that didn't piss me off at all, actually. That's quite an interesting answer. That's a very different take on it that we've never had before. I'm not sure how Brene Brown would feel about it, but
I'm sure fortunately, I don't think either of us are on her radar. But if we were, although I did call Dan Martell out one time and get a nasty Instagram message. So who knows? But yeah, that's it. if you could take Steve Jobs and give him the softness and kindness of Brene Brown with the determination of the business of Brene Brown, I think that.
Yeah. Yeah, he's one of those characters, isn't he? He's quite polarizing, but it's hard to argue with what he achieved and the vision that he had.
I think he's one of the most brilliant leaders of our time. I just imagine that he wasn't very easy to be around.
Yeah, that's what
and
I read.
Bet she's really easy to be around. So imagine if you could just...
Yeah. Oh, it's an interesting answer. Yeah. Full points, bonus points even.
Oh, good. I really thought you were going to try and make me pick one or the other. You don't want to say... You never want to say Steve Jobs because people think you're toxic instantly. But he's just, man, the things that man built and the people he developed, that's the thing that really gets me about him. That's awe-inspiring. Say what you want about his personality. Look at the people that were under him and look at where they are today. He really had a knack for talent development. And I'm sure that you have to have the thickest skin in the world to be able to get there. And I'll bet that there's 3 people for every one who made it that, have, not nice things to say, but the man, just the talent pool that he created from his vision is just inspiring.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly a strong argument. He was a product of his time, I think. And I know it doesn't feel like that long ago, but let's not dwell on how long ago it really was.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, David, so much for having me. It's been such a pleasure. Definitely worth getting up early for.
Oh, good. Pleased to hear it. Yeah, no, it was a lovely conversation, and I'm sorry we've run out of time.
Same.
Have to do it again sometime.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, I'll let you go. Thanks, Emma. Bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Emma, for your time today. Appreciate you had another meeting to get to, so really appreciate you running out the clock with us there. Totally lost track of time, which is always the sign of a great conversation. And yeah, we went down a couple of great tangents there. That conversation about hiring practices and the alternative interview methods was particularly enlightening for me. I think I've got the beginnings of an idea of how to balance those two ideas. But anyway, I'm sure we'll talk about that another day. Listener or viewer, thank you for being with us today. If you would like to learn more about Emma, where to get a copy of her book, or listen to one of the 2 podcasts that she hosts, do check the various links that you'll find in the show notes below in the episode description. Click on those, go and learn more of the things about the stuff. If you are in a bit of a leadership bind at the moment, if you are facing a challenge such as imposter syndrome or knowledge gaps or low confidence or building relationships with the people you lead, then pay a visit to my website as well. It's www.leadingwithintegrity.co.uk. On there, you will find various resources that can start to point you down the right path. You'll also find that green button to come and join us at the Integrity Leaders online leadership community. It's designed to help leaders in a transitional moment in your careers, whether that be promotion to a management or manager role for the first time, or taking the next step in your leadership journey, whatever that might look like, or perhaps an expanded team, greater responsibilities, other moments of change along that path, along your story so far. Integrity Leaders is there to help. It is there to provide you with a supportive community of people who are going through very similar moments of transition in their careers as well, who are facing similar challenges, working in similar organizations, as well as different ones, frankly, because sometimes there's more to learn there as well. Plenty of resources there, loads to learn, and of course, early access to these podcast episodes too. You get them the week before everyone else does. So come along and join. Green button on that website. And don't forget, you get a podcast listener or viewer exclusive discount. Use the code that's flashing on the screen or in the show notes to get 50% off forever, for as long as you stay a member, which is a pretty good deal, I think. Anyway, if you have any questions, you'll find my contact info below as well. Do feel free to reach out, ask any questions, or if you'd like to have a chat before you join. Always happy to chat leadership with anyone, which you probably know by now. So that's all from me today. Join us again next week. Until then, stay safe and be a leader, not a boss.